Proverbs chapter 1, we're going to be looking in verses 8 through 19 this morning. And this is the first unit of instruction in the book of Proverbs. And so up to this point, it has been really a purpose statement. And then last week, really the motto, but the essential principle that drives wisdom. And so from the fear of the Lord, everything else in Proverbs is drawn out. And so we cannot rightly understand Proverbs if we do not understand this fear of the Lord. And one of the implications of that is that the biblical wisdom, the proverbial wisdom, is not mere wisdom. It's not something you're going to pick up from the Old Farmer's Almanac or from a good therapist or from a philosopher. It is something that you only glean from Scriptures because it is built on this right understanding of God. And so verse 8, it says very simply, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother." And this is an interesting verse just by itself, because most of the Proverbs all of the Proverbs is addressed to my son, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But the vast majority of it comes from the father, not the mother. She is relatively silent in the book of Proverbs, especially the first 9 chapters. And it's not until you get to chapter 31 that you read a long instruction from the mother. And so this is a little bit unique, but it's also, I think it is foundational, in part indicating that these instructions, as written to a son, come from both parents. Not just the father, but from the father and the mother. So, but as we're talking about the audience of Proverbs, it is my son. And in I think the historical context of Proverbs, who Solomon originally addressed these to, I think we can reasonably say this was to some of his children, or it may be one specific child. Now, we do not know which child he's addressing. We do know that Rehoboam inherited the throne after Solomon died, and it's reasonable to think that Rehoboam would have been taught some of these principles that are laid out in Proverbs, but that's really all we can say. But for our sake, and the important thing is we understand this idea of my son, it is broader than just Solomon's immediate descendant. So we cannot leave the instruction of Solomon only back in the days of ancient Israel. It absolutely applies to us today, and that's where I would say it applies to all children. And I put that in quotation marks because the idea is not so much children in age as it is, if you will, in learning, those who are being taught. It's interesting that in this ancient culture, the teachers would at times refer to their students as my son. And it was just a generic term for anyone who was being taught. And so the application here is to all who are being taught by Scriptures. And one of the reasons I would say it has to be broader than just the son, the immediate descendant of Rehoboam, is because Proverbs is in the Bible. And if it was just for Rehoboam, we would have no need for the book of Proverbs to be in the Old Testament, to be preserved for us today as the Christian church. It would have been just good wisdom that would have been given to a son, maybe passed on from king to king to king, but it would not have been biblical. But it is in the Bible. And part of what we understand from that is all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, completely equipped to every good work. And so this book is included in the Bible that each one of us, as the people of God, will be completely equipped for every good work. And so it really, Charles Bridges, I think, said it well, is the disciple of the Bible will own himself to be a child in relative obligation. It's an important word there. Because he doesn't just say, he's not saying in relative age. Because no matter how old you are, the Bible is much, much older. But rather in obligation, that we as Christians have an obligation to the Bible. We have a duty to the Bible to go to it as children to be taught by it. And so we remain children in relation to the Word of God and our obligations, our duties and responsibilities to it long after we're no longer children in age. And so that's what we're talking about. Verse 8, we have the content of the instructions. And the first is the instruction of your Father. Now, I mentioned back in verse 2 to know wisdom and instruction. This is a very specific word that is a corrective instruction. It absolutely carries the idea of a penalty, a spanking after you have done wrong. It also, that's really the majority of usage in the book of Proverbs, is that sort of corporal punishment after making the mistake, but it also is used at times, and here it is being used as a preemptive correction. So there's an option laid out before the child, and the father is saying, don't do that. That's the wrong road. Don't go there. If you go there, you will regret it. It's a very straightforward and somewhat stern instruction that still carries the idea of a penalty. And we also have the law of your mother. Does anybody know what the Torah is? Yeah, it's the word for the Old Testament. It's the Hebrew word for the Old Testament, specifically for the law. It does get used for the whole Old Testament, but it's specifically for what we call the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. So he says, here, do not forsake the Torah of your mother. Now, I will say we can't in every case equate that word Torah with the Mosaic Law. And I do believe here it's being used more broadly than the Mosaic Law. And so this law of the mother would, in my estimation, includes the laws of Moses, but also the general laws that mothers lay down. And so the law of Moses does not require the Israelites, to brush their teeth before they go to bed, but the law of the mother does. And so I think there's both aspects here, but I think the way this is being used in the book of Proverbs is that this, by implication, is the law of God. And so that what really we are driven to in Proverbs is to think about the right expression of obedience to God's law. So there's a very real sense in which we can trace the Proverbs back to the commandments and see that these are specific applications of the various commandments given in the Mosaic Law. And we would recognize, as you've been reading through Proverbs, you've seen that a lot of these Proverbs are very relational and they're very practical. Most of them are not worship driven. They're not giving instructions about how to make sacrifices or go to the temple. They're giving instructions about how to work, what companions to avoid, what things and how to respond to evil companions above and beyond just avoiding them. They're giving very practical instructions about how to live and how to live in a particular society. And so they are, in my opinion, an expansion upon and an application of the laws of Moses. And so I think we rightly Understand this phrase, to the instruction of your father and law of your mother, to be pointing us ultimately to the commands of God. Even though they are in the mouth of human parents. And personally, I think they were originally in the mouth of Solomon and whichever wife is engaged in these instructions. We don't know. But I think there were two original people giving these instructions, and then God working through Solomon through inspiration so that Solomon wrote down these things, and they are the law of God. And turn back to Deuteronomy 4, just for a second here. Deuteronomy chapter 4. We see that there is a close connection between the law of God and wisdom. And we're going to see it as we keep going through Proverbs. We'll see this connection, but this is very explicit. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 5, Moses is speaking. He says, "Surely I have taught you statutes and judgments, just as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should act according to them in the land which you go to possess. Therefore you will be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples who hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people." So he's drawing a direct connection between the obedience to the commands of God, the Mosaic law, and the evident display of wisdom. That the nations would look at Israel's obedience to God's laws and say, they're wise. They are understanding. Both of those are the key words in Proverbs, wisdom and understanding. And so we're talking about ultimately the content that we are to be following is the Word of God, the commands of God recorded in His Word. And then he says the commands, very simple, when parents instruct you, hear and do not forsake. So there's an active reception and also an active maintenance. That you receive it and then you hold to it. I'm sure you've all talked to people. Maybe you've talked to kids and you know, they're sitting there, they're staring at you, they may even be nodding their head up and down, but they're not hearing. They are tuned out, they're going through the motions of listening without actually hearing. And this is an active listen, engage, but then also hold tightly to them. Do not forsake them, cling to them, let them cling to you. And the promise with this, there's a reward in this, is verse number 9, is there a graceful ornament on your neck, on your head, and chains about your neck. They're a valuable necklace and a graceful ornament. And so the idea of the graceful ornament seems to be some sort of maybe a crown, a wreath of sorts that is put on the head. It is typically understood as a symbol of victory. We know in ancient Egypt in the Olympic Games, the victors were given a laurel crown that they put on their head. It wasn't worth a whole lot. It was a plant. But that was beside the point, because it was the symbol of the victory that they had. And the valuable necklace, it just it really seems to be this worth and profit in life. I will say this is a bit of an obscure verse. We're not fully certain what all this is about. So this is really my best understanding of it. But I think Charles McLean said it well. If we see the true value and beauty of wisdom, we will never stop pursuing it. That ultimately is what we're talking about. We see that wisdom is valuable, beautiful, desirable, so that we pursue it with all of our heart. And so that really is a preface to the actual instruction. So this is the call. Listen. Hey, pay attention. Look me in the eyes. Listen to me. And then they give the instructions. Now, before I delve into them, I'm going to read verses 10 to 19 all at once here. I want to draw our minds back to verse 7, because it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And this first exhortation in Proverbs, this first instruction is avoid the fool. They don't actually call them that in these verses, but as you go through the book of Proverbs, we're able to read back and say, okay, we recognize that these sinners, are fools. And so what is happening now, verse 7 is really laid out a option before us, two choices. Fear the Lord or folly. Now the parents begin to make this choice very, very real. And they isolate it to a single instance, a single opportunity to choose, and say, choose wisely. So let me read verse 10. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us look secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit. Then the promise, the inducement is, we shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They lurk secretly for their own lives. So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. It takes away the life of its owner. So the first thing it says very simply is, if sinners entice you. So without considering verses 11 and following, generally speaking, what kind of things are sinners going to entice you to do? Yeah, sinful. Yeah, and that's really is front-loaded into this whole discussion here, is these are sinners. They're opening an invitation. They're offering an invitation to you. They're sinners. It's a sinful invitation. This is nothing from here on out is going to be good. It is really how this starts. And the response is real simple. Do not consent. So when they entice, don't follow along. Don't agree with them. Verse 15, he says very specifically, do not walk their path. Keep your foot, or do not set one foot on their path. So they're laying out this scenario, but the instruction is real simple. Do not agree to it. Do not turn on to their way. This word way is a major analogy in Proverbs. The word way is used not as a literal road, which we would think of, we walk down the road, it's a pathway, but rather the course of life. But it's more than just the course of life. It's more than just how you live. It is the choices you make. It's the character that those choices produce in you. It's the consequences of those choices. So when we're talking about the way, and you see the way in Proverbs, it's talking about the entire life. From the choices being made to, the character developed in you and its consequences. The fate of the choice is directly connected to the choice. And in Proverbs, it is presented as nearly inescapable. If you make this choice, this will be your fate. And also, their path. And he says, keep your foot from the path, but it's a very strong word. It's not just don't walk their way. It's don't even set one foot on their path. So you're walking down the road of life, and there's the crossroads On this side is biblical wisdom, and it is inviting you. The instruction of Scriptures is saying, come this way. On this side is sinners, and they are saying, come this way. Solomon says, don't walk that way. But more than that, you're here at the crossroads. Don't even do that. Don't even set your foot on that path. Do not make the first turning that direction. Because again, what Proverbs lays out is that when you begin to turn, that you are now following that way. And so ultimately, part of what Proverbs is showing is that choices develop character. So that your choice to turn on this path, it may be a little turning, is beginning to shape your character. And it's not shaping your character towards right wisdom, it's shaping your character towards folly. So don't even set your foot on the path. And here they also, they give now, the wicked are giving an invitation. They say, there in verse 11, come with us, be a part. And then they say, let us ambush our victims. Let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. And I will say, I think we read this, and I trust we recognize that most of the time, gangs don't actually introduce themselves to new members as in this strong a terminology. They're not inviting somebody to say, let's go commit as many felonies as possible in a short span of time. You know, they're not offering that. They're offering, camaraderie, treasure, a sense of belonging. They're offering that you can be cool, whatever they're offering, and they're disguising the actual sense of what they're doing. So trying to convince a kid to deal drugs, he's not going to say, hey, I've got something for you. If you do this, if you give this, you are going to trap thousands of people in a life of hopeless despair. Do you want to join in? He's going to say, hey, you want to make some money? But what is the end result? That's what Proverbs is showing. It's not their literal statements, but it is the actual import of their statements. It's what actually is going to happen. But in doing this, he's also characterizing really the inducements that are offered. And the first of them is, hey, nothing's going to touch us. We're gonna go and we're gonna lie in wait. We're gonna hide ourselves. We're gonna jump out. We're gonna ambush them. Boom! We're gonna hit them and run, and we're perfectly fine. And then we might even add to it and say, "There's a group of us here. And it's 5 of us and only one of him. What's going to happen?" And there's a promise of nothing's going to touch us. Then he says, "Let us overthrow them," and it means it's bold language. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit. It's actually down to death. Who escapes death? We know nobody does. Who escapes the grave? No one ever can. And they're laying this out there. This is certain. We are like death walking among them. Nothing can touch us. We're going to do everything that we want to do. And then they also say, we're going to have all manner of treasure. They're promising great riches. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with it. And think about how much treasure it would take to fill a house, even a small house. That's a lot of loot. And they're promising, again, riches. They're also... So it's all kinds and it's huge amounts. It's both there. Anything that you could want. And they're also offering, verse 14, a profitable partnership. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. Let's all go in together here. Share and share alike. We'll all go, we'll all earn it, and we'll all evenly divide it. And it really raises the question of, is there honor among thieves? Somebody who is appealing to your greed and offering violent means of satisfying your greed, are they really one to be trusted? You're really going to give them the PIN number to your ATM card? That's what they're offering. And part of this is a counterfeit community. Because you have here a gang. You notice verse 10, it's plural, sinners. Verse 11, let us. Verse 12, let us. Verse 13, we. Verse 14, us. Verse 15, them. This is not just one other person, it's a group. And they're offering, hey, you come in and you can be a part of this. You can, join in. We're going to build this relationship around this wicked cause, but it's going to be for all of our benefit. We're all going to profit as a result of it. And he describes in their wickedness, they hurry to do evil. They hasten to do violence. There in verse 16. They're not just, you're talking about it, sometimes people talk but don't back up their talk. It's just a lot of noise. Not these guys. They love evil. They run after it. They're obviously scheming it, and then they hurry to do it. So these are ones who are shown to hate what is right. They hate people. They're going to violently assault the innocent. They love their own selfish gain, and frankly, they're liars. I don't think we should or can believe that they're actually going to stick by their bargains. But that's the offering. So now there's a choice. Here's sinners enticing. And again, this is a very specific enticement, but they're enticing. And what Proverbs says is don't consent. And part of the way it shows us, teaches us not to consent, is look behind the lies. Look behind the promises in the surface. Advertising. Not everything that's advertised is evil. I realize that. But is every advertisement honest? No, I would say the vast majority of them are not. They're not maybe outright lying, but they certainly are disguising, hiding, downplaying. So you've heard it at the end of a commercial for the latest medication. He spends the last 5 seconds speed talking through all of the symptoms of this great new medication that's going to revolutionize your life. And it may be all that they promise it to be. But it's the nature of inducement to say, look at all this good, and that's evil. Don't worry about it, though. It's okay. It's the fine print at the bottom, crammed in at the last minute, because it doesn't matter. And Solomon in Proverbs is teaching us, look behind. And you go back to Genesis chapter 3. Satan tempted Eve. He offered her inducements. He showed her this fruit, caused her, to take notice of it. She saw this is desirable. This is good to eat. But he also said, this is going to give you wisdom. It's make you like God. And Eve saw it, and in her simplicity, did not look behind the words to see the real import. Because if Eve had stopped to think about it, would have been the actual import? Just from what you know of Genesis 2 and 3, God's instructions regarding the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, if Eve had a thought about Satan's word and thought wisely about it, what would she have recognized would also be the effects of eating that fruit? God said, in the day you eat thereof, you will surely die. Now, there's wisdom is looking, saying, okay, I have this presentation here, but he hasn't really said anything about death. Where does death come into this? And at the very least, you asked a good question. Okay, that's all good and true, but God said if I eat of it, I'm going to die. What is that? What's your answer to that? At least give me some more information here. And of course, biblically, we look at it and say, Satan's a liar. He's the father of lies. God is true and holy. I can't trust what Satan says. I do trust what God says. So I'm going to tell Satan, no. But we still fall in the same traps. Sin still promises things. Sin still makes offerings to us, inducements. You can be satisfied. You can find security here. You can have peace if you will just go do this. You can be wealthy. That one still works on everybody, I think. You can be wealthy. Do this. All it takes is one little lottery ticket. And, I mean, again, it's just a poke at advertising for a second. How many lottery losers do they put on the billboards? No, that's not the point. And it's wisdom that looks behind the promise. This is all going to go fund education and somebody's going to get millions, to the actual realities of the words. And that's where this instruction is, and obviously it's so applicable to us, is to look past what's said to what actually is. To do that, we have to have biblical wisdom. And then we go farther with this, because we also see their end. They have said all of this, but what's the actual end of their life, end of their path? And he gives a really strange, confusing illustration. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. And I will say, I've read, I don't even know how many commentaries, I've read a bunch of commentators and Hebrew scholars talking about this, and there's a variety of opinions. But my understanding is that no hunter in that age, when they caught birds, they might throw the net over the bird, or it seems like they may have laid it on the ground, covered it up a little bit, put some bait in the middle, and then when the bird comes in, they pull the net up real quickly. And my understanding of this verse is that he is saying, look, if you go out there and you got all these birds running around and you put a net out, the birds aren't going to go land in the net. They know something's off. They may not, obviously they don't have the intellect to deduce, oh, he put a net there, he's trying to catch us and cook us. But they do realize something is wrong, and they're not going to go there. The wicked, on the other hand, are stupidly unaware of their own destruction. So a bird is going to avoid a trap. If he has any hint that there's something wrong, they're going to avoid it. But even more than that, verse 18, he says, they lie in wait for their own blood. So they look back again in verse 11. Come with us. Let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent. Who is their intended victim? Yeah, the innocent. Whoever happens to be walking down the road in front of us. Verse 18, who is the actual victim? They become their own victims. They think they're going out for reward. But what it is the cheese on the mousetrap. And they're sticking their head in it. That's what's going on. And so they really, I think it's vivid here, they lie in wait for their own blood. They think they're ambushing someone else. They lurk secretly. They are sneaking around. They are hiding. They are doing everything they can to not be seen until it's too late. And who they are ambushing is themselves. And then verse 19, so are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. Takes away the life of its owners. Now, the word there, or the verse 19, generalizes it. So we start, really verses 11 through 18 is very specific. A temptation to join a gang of thugs. But then it broadens it back out, and it's just simply anyone who is greedy for any illicit profit. So it's still not, extremely broad, but it covers the categories not only of mugging, but of embezzlement and housebreaking, or just not letting the cashier overlook a couple things in your groceries and just slipping them in the buggy before they notice, or walking in the store and dropping a can of something in your purse. It's all the same. I'm not saying anybody, I hope none of y'all would do that. I don't think anybody here would do that. But it's all the same. That's the point. Whether we take the violent extreme here, that is assault and presumably murder, or the childish walking out of the store with a candy bar in your pocket. There's a destiny. You come to that crossroad, and you've set your foot on this path. And the destination there is death. The Proverbs is so incredibly profitable because it's so incredibly stark. Black, white. Life, death. All of this hedging about with shades of gray, and what about he's starving, his kids are suffering, or he was pushed to it, or he doesn't have a good job, or whatever. The education system is failing. This Proverbs cuts through all of that and says, your choices have consequences. And not just to what I presume to be a young man, maybe junior high age, but to all of us. We never stop developing our character. We never stop making choices. And we never stop feeling the consequences of those choices. And so he says, and I love this quote, it's Philip Marlowe, it's a fictional detective. But he says, crime is a sucker's road. Those who follow it wind up in the gutter, the prison, or the grave. But they never learn. That's from the 40s. And he nails it. I think it's Damon Runyon wrote Philip Marlowe. He absolutely nails it. It's Proverbs. You follow the life of crime, it's going to end badly. But that last line, they never learn. And this is what makes Proverbs so absolutely profitable. Is it says, look at their end and don't do it. Learn from their mistakes. The criminal knows how many of his friends are in jail. He knows how strung out his buddy is. He knows how much time he sat in jail. But he never learns. The wise person says, I'm going to look around and I'm going to see the consequences. I'm going to see the result. And I'm going to see when it doesn't work out well, I'm going to avoid their mistakes. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to learn. So there's some practical points here. How do we understand temptation? Temptation underestimates the danger. We saw that nobody's going to catch us. We're going to get away with it. We'll run in like death and take it all. Nothing can touch us. Sin says it's not that big a deal. It's just a little white lie. It's no big deal. It always underestimates the danger, and it always overestimates the reward. Again, you can be like God. In one narrow respect, she learned to her regret good and evil. But that's not all it's cracked up to be. And sin, temptation promises a reward far greater than it can actually provide. It ignores the warning of judgment so that sin just doesn't talk about it. I'll pick on advertising one more time and I'll try to stop. Beer commercials. How many beer commercials discuss the hangover? How many beer commercials show the guy with his head hanging over the toilet? Well, that's bad advertising. It's ignoring the consequences. How many beer commercials show the guy in jail because of his third DUI? They ignore the judgment. Temptation, it doesn't tell you everything. It fails to deliver on its promises. It can't deliver on all that it promises because much of temptation promises ultimate things. Much of temptation promises that you can have genuine peace. Temptation promises you can change the world. Temptation, it promises an identity, a purpose. If you will just pursue this, then you will be this, whatever it is that you might desire to be. And sin can never do that. Sin does not give identity. Sin does not give peace. Sin does not give security. Sin does not give satisfaction. Sin does not give wholesome, pleasant life. And that ultimately is what Proverbs is driving at, is how do you live a good life? A worthwhile life. A life that is pleasing to God, but also a life that is delightful to yourself. Sin doesn't give it. It cannot. Even though it will say, in this case, let's go rob somebody. We'll get millions of dollars and live the high life. And even if it works, it does not give actual life. You still, now you're buried under your riches, consumed by them and destroyed by them. Temptation cannot deliver on its promises, and it leads to death. James tells us that every man is tempted when he is led away of his own lust and enticed. He goes through the process, and he says it ends in death. There is no good thing that comes out of sin at all. And we take that and apply it in every aspect of our life. And we apply it to church ministry. For example, there's an abundance of opportunity to bring in only mildly sinful practices that are going to appeal to more people. And it's not going to work out well. We might have more people, might have a bigger church, might have multiple buildings. We might even have a multi-campus church. I could be on the TV. And that's not going to end well. I don't belong on TV. Sin leads to death and destruction. Always. No matter how little it is or how well-intentioned it may be. So let me move very quickly through some application here. Sin will never be as pleasurable or as profitable as it promises. I know I've already said that in 7 or 8 different ways this afternoon, but that really is the point. It's never what it promises. Do not walk along with the wicked in any way. No matter what your intentions might be, if you turn into the road, you're likely to follow in their footsteps. Charles Bridges says, often ruin has followed by not refraining from the first step. So don't even turn. Don't walk along the road. Behavior has consequences. Every one of us. Even as believers, our behavior has consequences. We have to recognize And we have to evaluate the consequences of what we're doing. And so directly related with that is decisions have consequences. So I look at every crossroad in front of me, every choice and option, and I know I've got to decide. I can't not decide. There is no option for not deciding. You have to go one way or the other. And you need to recognize there's consequences here. And the wise seek to understand the consequences before committing to an action. Well, this is a big part of wisdom, is forethought, is looking ahead. Some of it truly is learning from the mistakes of others, learning from what has happened to others, learning from the past. Let me give you one example. Maybe seem like a really strange example here. But the reason that American Christians, at least the vast majority of American pastors, I think would still say we absolutely would refuse to be licensed by the state. Or maybe I should say the vast majority of conservative, theologically conservative pastors would say we refuse to be licensed by the state. Traces all the way back to the 1600s. John Bunyan and others like him. Because we saw what happened when the state exercised control over the preachers. They did not just say, okay, here's your licensure, your official state permission to preach. They said eventually, and here's what you have to preach. And so we have, hopefully, at least some have learned the lesson and say, if the state requires us to have official state licensing to preach or to be a church, we're going to say no. Because the consequences of that decision have already been revealed to us. We don't need to wonder. I think we would be foolish to trust the good graces of a secular government. And so we say, no, I know where this is going to go. I'm going to understand the consequences. And by the way, this works as well, with teenagers. And I'll take the simple and obvious example, drugs. What are the consequences of smoking a joint? And the teenager's going to say, well, it's not that big a deal. If they're inclined to do it, if they want to do it, it's not that big a deal. But there's an opportunity to say, okay, you say that. Now let's talk about some things. Let's talk about these people whose lives are ruined, whose brain is baked because they began smoking marijuana. And it is folly. It is absolutely folly to say, well, that won't happen to me. Proverbs says, you walk that road, that's your destination. And so we can help in making decisions, not, again, anywhere between official church matters and dealing with grandchildren or great-grandchildren and all the other circumstances of life. We can make decisions by looking and saying, what are the consequences of this decision? And there are times where we're going to recognize it's not that big a deal. The consequences are, it's not a question moral or immoral. So the consequences are minor. So do I buy Hunt's or Heinz? It's at least as far as we know, it's not that big a deal. But there are many decisions where the consequences are much greater. And it may even be, I'll give one more quick example, may even be buying a car. I look at the consequences. What kind of car am I getting? And honestly, I think wisdom says, I'm going to sign up for Consumer Reports and see what the 20-year habit or practices of this company have been and how reliable this kind of vehicle has been. Or I'm going to talk to a mechanic friend who knows and works on vehicles and he's able to tell me what it is. Because if I go buy a lemon, not only am I paying for it, I'm paying for it, and I'm paying for it, and I'm paying for it, until finally I get rid of it. And there's a consequence. Is that a moral issue? Is it sinful to buy a wrong car? No. But does it have consequences? Oh, yeah. And the wise seeks to understand the consequences. And then related with that, the wise one, I'm going to come back to that, sees harmful consequences and avoids the dangerous path. So Proverbs 14:8 says, the wisdom of the prudent is to understand this way, but the folly of fools is deceit. When we come to the second half of this study, I'm going to talk about Proverbs 14:8 a little bit, but I'll point out to you, the wise, the prudent, understand his life, his way of life, his choices, his character, its consequences. The fools, he's deceived. There's no understanding there. There's lies. There's the exact opposite of understanding. There's obscuring proper understanding. And then a prudent man foresees evil and hides himself. The simple pass on and are punished. The call of this section is look ahead. That's really it. Look ahead. See where the choices lead.